This is a Hot Pie Media original.
Read his review, I don't know if it's yesterday, the day before. Interesting. It's All Things Rolling Stone with Peter Blackstock, who's the music critic for Austin 360 and Statesman.com. Safe to say, Peter, you gave the Stone show glowing praise, right?
I thought it was really great. And, it was the first time I'd ever seen them. So I think I was probably, likely to be impressed with it. But what interested me was that I talked to quite a few people who had seen them several times and were saying that this might have been the best they'd ever seen them. That surprised me. But they were really, really good for guys in their 70s who you wouldn't think necessarily would be capable of doing that anymore.
Yeah, I heard the same thing from people that had seen them. And I've sort of followed the reviews around the country. They got a pretty awful review, I think, from the show in Charlotte that was saying things about the sound. And then I found your comments pretty interesting about how high the quality of sound was. Yeah,
and a lot of people, almost everybody I talked to had that kind of impression. The guy who was the tour production director, a guy named Tom, forget his last name, Sklereth or something. It's hard to pronounce. But anyway, he did an interview with us, a phone interview about a month and a half ago in the middle of the tour, or just as it was getting started. And he stressed that the production was generally smaller and not as flamboyant as some of their past tours, but that they were really focusing on wanting to get good sound. And when he said that, I was like, well, we'll see when the showtime comes. But I found that to be, I think he was right on the money. He was being honest about that.
Yeah. So for Stones fans, this lived up to everything?
I think so. I mean, you're always going to want songs that they didn't play because they just have so many great songs. And there was stuff I would have liked to have heard, or I would have traded out for some of the things they did. But really, I thought that the set list was very good too. Didn't really realize until I got home and started, looking closer at it, just how 60s weighted it was.
Really?
About
interesting.
80% of the songs were from the 60s. So they made music as they kept going on through the years. But I think they realized that the stuff people really want to hear goes no later than the 70s or maybe the early 80s. And the only song they played that was more recent than that was this brand new song that came out last year, Living in a Ghost Town.
That's interesting. So do you think that was Austin specific, or was the entire tour that way? Was it 60s heavy?
That's pretty much the tour. Yeah, there was I forget whether it's 12 or 13, I think 12 songs that they played at every single show on the tour. And that's out of, 18 or 19 that they did each night. So 2/3 of it was pretty scripted. And that's where most of the 60s stuff was hitting, was those things they were doing all the time. Yeah.
Well, we are, and I don't even think when I read your piece, I don't know if you made reference to this, but we're always going to be reading into it. It's like Tom Brady. We're going to read into everything. Oh, is that a sign that they're done? Do we read anything into the tour or the Austin show that tells us they're done? Or do we read into it, they're not done?
I don't read into anything from what they did at the show that way. And I think there's kind of two ways to look at it. One, they're still very capable of rocking out at this age, and that suggests to me that they're not done. On the other hand, that's not going to last much longer. If they're pulling this off in their 70s, I don't know that they could pull it off in their 80s. Willie's still out there playing at 88.
Yeah.
Tony Bennett was still singing at, I saw him at 89 years old at Bass Concert Hall a few years ago.
I did too.
Yeah, and so you can keep doing it, but it's easier for Willie and Tony, for the kind of music they play, to do that. It's harder to pull off what the Stones do in their 80s, but we'll see if they try. But the biggest sign of whether they might be done is they lost Charlie, and I think they went ahead with this one because they had the commitment already and everything was in place, and I think it was the right thing to do. But I wouldn't blame them if they decided we really don't want any book any new tours once Charlie's not there.
I
don't know.
Mick Jagger's brother, Chris Jagger, was sitting right across from me a few days ago. Interesting guy himself, and I cannot believe I didn't ask this, but I can't stop thinking about it. Is there any time in the 59 years they've been together? Is that right?
Yeah, I think 62.
Is there any time in the 59 years that they broke up? I mean, even for a week or a month, or is there any time that there was ever even a hint? I cannot believe I didn't ask him. Hey, did your brother ever say, F those guys, I'm done? The Eagles couldn't stay together 2 weeks. Van Halen can't stay together. I mean, was there ever a time? Were there ever any sort of public friction or a possible breakup?
I'm not the kind of guy who's such a huge Stones fan that I've read books about him and stuff. So there's probably details there that I wouldn't know. My understanding is there was a period there when Mick started making solo records where it was a little iffy for a while.
Okay.
But there was definitely never a time when they said we're done, and then there's never been a Stones reunion tour because there was never a breakup.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think they handled that, I think, smarter than most bands, because really, I mean, the way I look at it is, you're not done until you're gone, and they're still around, and they've been, I think, smart to never just say, oh, we're not doing this anymore. They've always left that door open, and here we are in 2021, and they're still playing.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one that can compare, but I'm trying to think of any legendary artists that no one's going to go 59 years except Willie, where you didn't have some breakup of some kind.
Yeah, and Willie's different because it's him.
It's him, right.
Different with bands versus solo artists. But yeah, I would say I don't think there's anybody that's gone that long. There probably are some others that were close. I think ZZ Top did that for about 50 years.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Dusty Hill just died, but they're a pretty good example, I would say. There are others. Rush, I think, did it for a long time.
The Metallica guys, has it been that one group this whole time?
I believe so. They're a little, they didn't start till a little later than these 60s bands, but that's maybe another example of one that has a long history with the main lineup. Yeah.
It was brilliant. Not that the Stones needed publicity, and certainly not that Mick Jagger needs publicity, but the selfies at various places. I mean, it started, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they've done this before. It started that deal in Charlotte when he first did it at that little pub. And we all talked about it. I can't believe the guy sitting next to him doesn't know it's Mick Jagger. Then he did the brilliant thing in Dallas where he goes to the museum. I don't know that it was staged. I kind of took that to mean the guy really did in the middle of the day just show up at that place. And then, of course, everyone's playing the game. Where are they going to show up in Austin? And then the broken spoke. What do you know about that? And have you talked to people whether he really was there and got a beer? I find that hard to believe.
No, I think that was just, a photo op out front, and that's it.
And he jumped out of the car, took the picture, and jumped back in and went back wherever.
My guess, that's my guess. It's purely a guess because I don't know any specific details of how that went down. I was more interested in the other places he went that day. I thought it was cool that he went to McKinney Falls. I think that's partly because it's kind of out near the Circuit of the Americas.
Right.
It's kind of on the way out there to the venue. But there were clues for that. Like when he was in Nashville, you would have expected a bunch of clubs on Lower Broad or something. And, in Nashville, he took pictures out in some sort of nature preserve and at like a garbage dump. So one of the things that I liked.
Wait, I missed that part. He went to McKinney Falls?
Yeah. There were 5 photos in Austin, and the others were he had a little pontoon boat out on Lady Bird Lake.
Yeah.
McKinney Falls was one, and then there was this little taco stand that is sort of kind of right near McKinney Falls on Burleson Road.
Okay.
And it's called like Taqueria El Trampo Mayor or something. And he was just sitting at a picnic table out in front of that. And it's like, it's not a, you couldn't find a review of that place from anyone in Austin. They just saw it and thought, hey, this would be good, So, and I drove by that place on the way to the to the Circuit of the Americas on Saturday and took my own picture. And it's hilarious just how small the thing was.
Did you talk to anybody there? Did they? I mean,
no. It was. I would have, but it was closed.
Okay.
Yeah. But I took a picture just because the zoomed in photo that Mick posted made it look maybe a little larger than it is, and then I took sort of a wider view, and it's just a tiny little trailer with 2 picnic tables out front in like a auto mechanic parking lot. So I kind of appreciated that he did some stuff like that was beyond the tourist places,
Yeah, I mean, the whole concept of him doing that, again, they don't need the publicity. They're not having to sell tickets. I mean, there's something about it that was really, it was endearing. I mean, and I don't know if he ever really went into places. I don't know. I mean, I think we all want to believe he grabbed a beer wherever he was and just took a selfie. Yeah,
and I don't know, and that's where you'd have to talk to someone else who just happened to be there at the time. And I have seen nobody who's had that kind of intel on it, which leads me to believe it probably wasn't, because if he actually hung around for a bit, you had people posting, "Hey, I saw him, up at the bar at the Spoke," you know, and I don't think he's doing that.
Yeah, and he would stand out at the Broken Spoke.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the guy in skinny jeans who's in his 70s with a British accent and that chin would probably stand out.
I think what he's doing is he's clearly got someone doing the sort of advanced work on this and making some plans. And I think some of them are spontaneous, like that taco stand on Burleson Road, I think was just a drive-by and like, hey, let's go here. But I think they probably looked into McKinney Falls beforehand. The other thing about that is it's not a place you would tend to think he would turn up, and it's not a place that tends to be super crowded, so he could do it pretty incognito, and I think he was also looking for that.
John McClellan is the co-founder and creator of Atx Hot Sauce in all 50 states, now in several retail outlets as well. So we're going to turn it over to the social media rock chef superstar, and we're going to walk through a few sauces and why you should buy. We've done beet heat, so we're second in line now for the tasting. Don't forget, everyone, go to atxhotsauce.com. So here we go.
All right. So this one is our smoked habanero 5-pepper. We smoke habaneros with ancho,
Is that going to hurt?
This one? No, This one's actually really, really good. Okay. This is like your traditional tapatilla, but without the vinegar in it, right? And because of that fermentation process that we've talked about all the time. This one is great on sandwiches, pizzas, things like that. Great on hot wings. I think you're going to really like this one too, especially the smoky flavor with the adobe chipotle and the smoked habaneros. We actually smoked the habaneros before we.
Does that go with the cab?
This would not go with the cab. This would go with the great Chenin Blanc, though.
I teed you up with that one.
Yeah.
That is good.
That's good. It's just classic take. Well, it's a new take on a classic item. So it's called smoked habanero 5-pepper.
All right, don't forget
One of my favorites.
Don't forget atxhotsauce.com. I played it on the show, and of course, people had already started to share it. His Austin, I took it to mean he was cracking a joke, the standard Austin joke of everyone's coming here. I don't know I can't remember if you mentioned it in your review. What was your takeaway from his cliche-filled rant about Elon Musk lives here, and then there's something about Jerry Jones and Terrytown? What was your takeaway from that? I mean, that sounded intentionally scripted.
I think it was, and this is pretty typical of what bands and artists in those positions do. Typically what they will do, and I do know from firsthand from a friend who was at before a Springsteen show in North Carolina. My friend, who was the writer for the newspaper in Raleigh, got someone from Springsteen's crew, called him up and asked him, "Can you give me a few local references of cool places in the Raleigh-Durham area?"
Yeah.
And sure enough, one of the things he mentioned was the thing that, Springsteen called out that night at the show. So I think the Stones do the same thing. They do a little research about places to mention or people to mention, and then they just kind of riff on that. I think, Mick started that off by saying something like, we're thinking of moving to Austin after the tour. But he very carefully qualified everything he said in that little rant at the end by saying, none of this is true, of course. So that was kind of the disclaimer saying, okay, this is kind of a bit.
I think Austinites took it as he's making fun of the standard old joke about everyone's moved here, or are you saying that he actually was trying to connect, and it was really cheesier than I think?
I think he was doing something humorous and maybe trying for a little bit to make people think he was serious.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I took out of it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've never heard the Jerry Jones thing. I mean, of course, Austinites, nothing would surprise us, but I'd never heard the Jerry Jones reference was odd.
That was odd. Yeah, I
think he got that wrong.
Yeah,
I don't think that's correct, actually.
When you think of the other things he could have mentioned,
Yeah.
But the Jerry Jones thing, I don't think it is correct. But that's why also he said at the end, he said none of this is true. Okay. So he got himself off the hook.
Yeah. Are they going? I mean, so the song during the pandemic, "Living in a Ghost Town," goes to number one, which was is that 6 decades of having a number one? I think it is.
Yeah, it must have been because it started in the 60s. So
right.
Yeah.
You didn't get the sense, or they didn't push it, any new material?
No, that was the only thing. I don't get any sense that they're working on another record. I would almost be more surprised if they actually made another record at this point than if they toured again. Because it's kind of, if they want to tour, it's pretty easy to just gear it up and do it with all of the classic stuff. Songwriting at this point, maybe we'll see something surprising, but I'm not seeing any signs that they're still trying to create new material.
I'm sure you're going to say it's been attempted before. Maybe now's a better chance. The prospects of getting them at ACL. I doubt it. If they did come back, that might be like the best place for them to do it. I think one thing was clear. When they played in 2006, the first time they ever played Austin, when they played at Zilker Park, right?
That was a pretty successful match of the artist and the event and the venue. That worked pretty well. I wasn't here then, but everything I know from what people have told me is that was a pretty great place to see the Stones. Saturday was a great Stones show despite the venue, which was turned out to be just an abomination for a lot of fans trying to get there, stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
And there were issues with crowd flow inside the venue. Even people who got there couldn't get to their areas on the back lawn because there was just jam ups in the entry gates. So Coda did a lot of things wrong, and I'm not sure, if I were a promoter, no way would I book a band on that super stage again. The amphitheater shows are fine because that's a max of about 15,000 people, and the infrastructure at Coda can handle that. But I don't think they can handle these big concerts. I mean, Saturday night was a disaster for a lot of people.
Yeah, of course, it's been pretty highly publicized that it was a disaster. So what does that mean going forward? Who's the next? I mean, no one's in the Stones ballpark, but they've had big acts out there. Who's next up that you think, this could go horribly wrong as well?
Yeah, the main thing, they've done the big shows during F1. And
yeah, I guess that's true.
That
right.
kind of works because I went to Billy Joel last month and I got stuck in that same traffic. It's why I knew to go early for the Stones show. I showed up at like 3:45 and I had no problems. But the people who tried to go at leave their house at 6 o'clock, they were going to be in trouble because you kind of have to treat this like an all day festival thing and not just like a concert you drive up to and go to. Coda just doesn't work that way for big concerts. And I don't know that there's anything really that can be done to fix that unless they put a lot of effort into making the roads out there, which are all small roads, work better than they did on Saturday. But really, I mean, they hardly ever do big shows out there with that super stage setup, except at F1. So this was a rarity.
Okay.
But the question might be, who is big enough to play to 50,000 people? And if you're not going to put them at Coda because that's proven to be really problematic at this point, where do you put them? I'm not really sure. I guess the ACL Fest is really the only place for that large.
I mean, but is there really, when you think about it now? I know there are people that can draw, and you go to ACL as the example, but there's not really. Our generation we would call them stadium bands, but that's not really the. I mean, outside of Metallica, the Stones, and I don't know who's left.
Well,
I mean,
U2.
Who's the stadium? Okay, U2, but are they touring at all again? Anytime soon?
I mean, I reviewed their last tour through here in Houston, but I think what it kind of means is that the bands who are stadium sized draws, they're going to play Dallas and Houston, and they're just not going to play Austin because we have Memorial Stadium, but that's never been used as a venue since the Eagles and the 90s.
Exactly. It was the Eagles and I think ZZ Top, and that is it. And they apparently at ZZ Top they burned the turf. So
there was all that controversy about Darryl Royal not wanting it to happen. Because of that. So that's always been a question mark and a problem. Right now maybe it'd be okay to have concerts there because the football team isn't doing much good with that stadium right now.
Right. So there's no, I mean, you think about that, other than ACL Fests, there's nowhere else people play. I mean, the Irwin Center feels like it's off the radar now. I know it's going to be torn. It's going to be torn down, but I mean, whatever's next, is that what goes there other than basketball and a Star Wars show or something?
Well, yeah, the new arena, the Moody Center, is opening next April, and they're doing they've already booked a lot of big shows in there. They're doing their grand opening is Willie Nelson and George Strait, and they've got The Weeknd and I think John Mayer and some other. So the big arena acts are going to play there, but that's still not big enough to get these 40, 50,000. So I don't know that Austin really has a solution to that. I think people wanted it to be Circuit of the Americas, and there's some reasons why it could be, but I've seen too much evidence now that, and lots of people just saying, I will never go to a show there again. So
you think it takes Austin off the map for the U2s, or if the Stones want to come back, we're going to be off the map?
Maybe, I kind of doubt that the Stones would come back again anyway, because we were kind of lucky to get them this time. It was 15 years since the last one. If you project out another 10 years before they might come through there again, it's too late.
Yeah,
so,
no. They're not.
I think this was the last hurrah for Austin for the Stones. But yeah, if other bands want to play, 50,000 size shows here, I kind of think it's either they're just going to be on the festival bill, or maybe somebody makes an exception for Memorial Stadium, and that's about it.
But do you recommend that venue for smaller size crowds?
Oh, it's fine for the amphitheater shows. I review shows there fairly regularly, and there's traffic, but they have enough infrastructure with the roads and the parking to handle the 15,000 that fit in that amphitheater. And Willie Nelson's Picnics do fine there, but it's when they try to do these much larger shows that they get into trouble with the roads that go into the place, and with parking, and people end up pulling over on the side of the road and walking in, and it's just kind of disastrous.
I can't believe the Stones played the Cotton Bowl. I'm still trying to figure that one. I and of course it rained and weather was terrible and all that. I can't believe that. That's a terrible place to watch a football game.
Yeah, I saw Simon and Garfunkel there in 1983, and it was raining that day too. 83.
I don't know how that transpired. How did Jerry Jones let that get away from him?
Right. Yeah, it's very that I don't really pay too much attention to Dallas because I'm focused on our own market, but it is really odd that was not at Jerry World.
Yeah. If you're a betting man, Is there a Rolling Stones tour 2022?
I would say no. I would think they would at least take a year off and regroup and maybe revisit whether they want to do something in 2023. Steve Jordan is a fantastic drummer, and they're great with him. Everybody misses Charlie, obviously, the band first and foremost, but they could still tour. I mean, I would say, 2022, probably not, but 2023, maybe, because if they are still going to tour again, they got to do it soon, because it's 5 years from now, they probably won't be able to.
If you're making a recommendation for someone to go see the next month or two, who do you put on your radar locally?
Locally?
Yeah.
You mean like Austin bands or
anything? Yeah, I'd say Austin bands.
Yeah. Well, a really cool show that just got booked recently for ACL Live is for New Year's Eve is Spoon. And, they had a long run of Willie playing New Year's Eve there from basically when that venue opened in 2012 up through about 2018, 2019. And then Willie had kind of decided he wanted to he goes to Hawaii usually in December and January. And I think he decided he wanted to just stay there and not come back for the shows. And then right after that, COVID happened. And so it was off the books anyway. So they've been trying to figure out what else are we going to do that could be special in Austin on New Year's Eve. And booking Spoon, I thought was really smart, because they're a band certainly big enough to play that place. Had a really good year with a new record, and I just think I think the new record's coming out early next year, actually. But yeah, it's that's a really good New Year's Eve quality booking with one of Austin's best local bands.
All right, very cool. Peter, as always, good talking to you, man.
All right, thanks.